So we've set the stage for what emotional intelligence is, why it's so important, particularly for government leaders who have multiple stakeholders that they have to engage and be mindful of. Beyond that, there's the taxpayer dollars that they have to steward. There are other elected officials and other government entities that they have to be mindful of. Meanwhile, they're also taking care of the people inside their organizations, right? And so it is so important for government leaders to develop emotional intelligence, particularly because crisis is unfortunately to be expected, right? We seem to have gone from crisis to crisis to crisis, right? So it's important that we develop emotional intelligence so that we're better prepared to manage our emotions in crisis times, to really show ourselves grace, right? And so that we can care for ourselves to better care for others and treat others as we would want to be treated, and to be able to demonstrate empathy, right, for those who might be experiencing crises in a different way, and uh, in some ways differently than we have and will because of various disparities. So, crisis communication is another critical skill for leaders, government leaders, to develop. And again, when coupled with emotional intelligence, it helps them to enhance that skill, but also to lead people forward more positively, constructively, and responsibly forward. So when it comes to crisis communication, I've had a lot of experience in this space. Going back to when I was a student leader in college, 9/11 happened. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember where I was. I remember what I was watching. I frankly was in what's called Lane, is the cafeteria where all the students eat. And there are these big screen TVs. And I remember standing and watching these planes hit the Twin Towers. And I'm like, what movie is this? I literally thought it was a movie, but it was happening in real time in New York. And the devastation, not just in New York, but other parts of the country in that time, on that day. I mean, you don't forget it. If you were alive during a 9/11, you just don't forget it, especially the ones who've lost family members or who were impacted physically and mentally in other ways, in a very severe way because of 9/11. So I remember helping other students and leading the way forward as a student leader during that time. And then after college and after law school, I moved into government leadership. And one of the first jobs I had, I was recruited to address the fallout of a statewide hiring scandal that led to criminal investigations, that led to all kinds of other investigations and indictments, and were the front page of the two biggest newspapers. Was just on the media cycle. It made national news. And here I was, the head of HR, and then became the head of employment law and employment matters for the organization. Here I was responsible for addressing the hiring practices and employment practices related to these statewide scandals. And so my job was really to address the crises, address the ineffective workplace practices, address the issues, the systemic issues, the legacy problems that, frankly, had to overhaul them all in order for us to get to a place where we were working as a productive, constructive, healthy agency to provide the services to all of the citizens and residents of the state. Then I was recruited later on in transportation to address the fallout of Snowmageddon. And Snowmageddon, for those who were in the Northeast at the time, can remember that the snow fell and it fell and it fell and it fell, blizzard after blizzard after blizzard. And the snow didn't melt, I think, until July of 2016. And so the transportation collapsed and people were not able to get to work or get anywhere. And so I was recruited then to address the fallout of that debacle. And so that was another crisis that I had to navigate through. Other crises that I've had to navigate through as a government leader and also a consultant, the Boston Marathon bombing and the tragic loss of life during that terrorist attack here in Massachusetts at the time. The global pandemic, which I've mentioned before, and social unrest. And so crisis is something, unfortunately, that I've had to lead through. And I've learned that communication is absolutely important. And the first thing I needed to do was really center myself, right? And by centering myself, I mentioned before, I'm a person of faith. I am a Christian, a believer in Jesus Christ. And so taking the time for devotion, taking the time to pray, taking the time to listen to worship music, taking the time to really just deal with what I was feeling and experiencing in the moment helped me to calm myself. It helped me to let go of some things that were frankly outside of my control, but to ask for wisdom and discernment and clarity for the things that were within my control, and to partner with others so that I could communicate information in a timely and responsible way, as accurately as possible, but also to know what I didn't know so that I could go back to others who were managing and who were on the front lines to get information to people who absolutely needed it. And so emotional intelligence absolutely enhances crisis communication. When you become self-aware, you don't avoid or ignore what you're feeling, so that spills over into how you show up as a leader. You are able then to deal with that so that you can be present and then be able to engage other people. And manage those relationships and manage how other people are feeling so that you can engage them and communicate in an empathetic way, recognizing that different groups need different communication, need different information, and need that information in different ways. And there's an article written by Lou and other researchers that talks about navigating through crises, and particularly wildfires in California, and the need to bring different stakeholders to the table, the need to be able to ask questions, right? And in order to get information. And crisis communication, while it might be about dispensing or sharing information, it's also about asking questions and knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know and bringing the right people to the table in order to get more information, understand what's happening, make better decisions, and be able to reach the people who need it, get resources to them, and communicate in a timely way, but also through different modes of communication so that people who are on social media can get it, people who watch the news can get it, people who read newspapers can get it, people who access their phones can use different apps to get it. And so they talk about the different methods of communication during a crisis to make sure that the multiple points of communication are met and are also leveraged to ensure that people are getting what they need to get through the crisis as well. And so, yes, it's important for us to develop our emotional intelligence around crisis communication, particularly for government leaders, because we're not just managing through the crisis for ourselves and for the agencies, but we have multiple stakeholders that we have to be mindful of. And in that same article, the authors identify competencies that government leaders need to embrace and develop. And I'm just going to highlight two here. Humility, to know what you don't know, is key. I find that when it comes to crisis communication, you don't make anything up. If you don't know, you ask questions. If you don't know, you get the right people to the table and you find out what you need to have in order to make better informed decisions and be able to communicate appropriately to different groups. And then the flexibility to change course as appropriate. You know, there's a book by Governor Charlie Baker, who's the past governor of Massachusetts, and his first chief of staff, Steve Kadish. They discuss in their book Results how important it was for them to pivot as quickly as possible throughout the pandemic, during social unrest and the protests around police brutality and systemic racism, different scandals, right, and transportation challenges. They discuss how they've had to navigate all of that and change course whenever necessary so that the right people could get the right resources when necessary in order to solve the problems on their behalf. Remember what I said at the beginning, right? Government leaders are responsible for themselves, the agencies, taxpayers, constituents, different communities, and they have to partner with businesses, with nonprofits, with grassroots organizations, union leaders, different experts from different fields in order to move people through and forward and past a crisis. And in order to do that, you have to be flexible and having that humility, right? Managing the emotion of pride is so important because if you're prideful in those moments, you're not going to ask questions. If you're prideful in those moments, you're not going to engage everyone you need to engage, right? You're not going to bring other experts to the table because you might be concerned that they'll outshine you, right? And that's not a crisis. Is not the time to worry about one's ego and oneself. Crisis is an opportunity to care for other people and to get other people through, right? And so I wanted to highlight those humility and flexibility are competencies government leaders need to have in crisis moments. So some tips to leverage as you navigate through crisis: asking simple questions: who, what, when, why, and how. When coupled with focus, awareness, empathy, honesty, and collaboration, can help you get the right information to the right people. So let's go through these 5 questions, right? In crisis communication, you need to know who is at the table and who's not at the table, who is represented by the people at the table and who is not, and to get them to the table, who needs to get information, and who's going to get it to them, right? Then what is the information that you need? What needs to be communicated? When does it need to be communicated? How quickly, how often does the information need to be communicated? Why does it need to be communicated, right? And then how, right? There are different articles that talk about needing to leverage different modes of communication, including social media, to get information to different demographics so that they have the information they need to navigate a crisis, right? And as you're asking these questions and leveraging these 5 simple questions, you'll have better focus, better awareness around the different issues, have empathy for what different groups are going through, be honest about what you have and what you don't have at your disposal to help these various groups, and be able to collaborate with different partners and stakeholders to get information and resources to people and communities as well, right? So as we continue with the tips and tools, applying the results framework is really going to be helpful as you lead through in your government role. And I conducted an interview with the chief of staff, the first chief of staff to Governor Baker, Steve Kadish, a friend and frankly someone I have the highest regard for. He is the co-author of this book, and he talks about the results framework. People are policy, follow the facts, focus on how, and push for results. And the interview is a little over an hour long, and there are some questions, Q&A at the end. It's a great resource and something that I think you might want to go over, but also get the book. Get the book, because there are different examples of how they leverage the framework to navigate through crisis, but also explore opportunities for growth, for advancement, and to bring new resources and solutions to the table to support various communities.